Hey guys, I'm Jack and I'm back. So in case you don't know, I'm making 3 Christmas themed videos. Today's the second, so if you haven't watched the first one, I would hope that you go and watch it, but you don't have to watch it in really any order. This is just the way I'm putting it out. But yeah, so if you haven't, please go check that out before or after this video, doesn't matter. But yeah, the last video was on the physical sacrifice that Jesus made on Christmas, and today's video is going to be on the spiritual sacrifice Jesus made on Christmas. So I'm gonna get right into it. I'm gonna start it off a little bit different. I'm gonna read from Mark 1 verses 12 to 13, and it says, "The Spirit then compelled Jesus to go into the wilderness, where he was tempted by Satan for 40 days. So what I want to focus on, at least for this video, is the fact that Jesus was tempted. All right, that was the part of the sacrifice Jesus made. So I don't want y'all to get it twisted. Jesus was tempted as in he had opportunities to sin, but he never actually sinned. He didn't contemplate sinning it. Temptation came across, and Jesus didn't do anything with it. But he had opportunities to sin, but did not sin. All right, he was tempted. The devil tempted Jesus, like, hey, there's this, and Jesus flat out rejected it. So he was tempted, but he never engaged in the temptation. I hope that's clear. And one thing I want to make sure that we all know is that the same temptations that we have are the ones that Jesus faced. So, I mean, whatever things tempt you, or you know that tempt others, those are things that the devil presented Jesus with at some point or another. Jesus had opportunities to sin, plenty of them, but he didn't. So the same temptations that we have were the same ones that Jesus was presented with, but never engaged in. So the reason I'm talking about temptations is because it's a form of a spiritual attack. You know, Ephesians 6 talks about how we don't fight wars with flesh and blood, and they're spiritual wars. Temptation is just one of the methods the enemy uses to attack. It's a spiritual attack, and Jesus faced that. And so the attack was with temptation. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is because, I mean, the struggles we go through, the things that we're tempted with, they're real. I mean, you know what you're going through, and you might not relate to something that that person is going through, but to them, that struggle is very real. So Jesus was presented with opportunities to go through those struggles, but he was able to push it off and reject it and not engage in those temptations. He did that throughout his whole life, you know. Jesus had, like I said, he had plenty of opportunities to sin. I mean, he died on the cross when he was 33 years old. The fact is, Jesus, as a man, he had plenty of years to sin and did not. And that's crucial because, I mean, we can say his mission was to go die on the cross. But to die and to complete that mission, he had to have lived a perfect life. He had to have rejected all those temptations, rejected all sin, not engaged in any of that. And so that's really important to know and focus on. I mean, he willingly went through that. He became fully man. He was fully man and fully God. And so he could have easily given in to sin. But his mission was to not do that. You know, so he became the perfect sacrifice and died on that cross. And I mean, if Jesus had sinned even once, I mean, his sacrifice of dying on the cross would be pointless, and we would literally be doomed, and we would be going to hell. If someone thinks that, oh, Jesus did sin, then that would mean none of us have any hope of getting to heaven, because in order for Jesus' sacrifice to work, he had to be perfect, and so he had to really reject all of that, all of those spiritual attacks. Moving on a bit, so the reason I'm talking about this as a spiritual sacrifice is because, I mean, Jesus and God were one. It's kind of hard to explain how God is the Father, Jesus is the Son, but they're one, but they are one. So Jesus was just the physical form of God and became man. Jesus lived life that way, being one with God, had a deep relationship with God. So I want you to think about like someone you love, like deeply. You know, it could be a significant other or a family member or anyone, just someone that you care about deeply. Now multiply that a couple of times and you get the relationship between God and Jesus. You know, they were one and they loved each other. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because in order for Jesus to complete his sacrifice, he needed to take on our sin. Okay, so as he was dying on the cross, he started taking on our sin. And something that we should all know, I think I mentioned in a previous video, with God and sin don't mix. It's like water and oil. They can't intertwine and become together. It just can't. And so, or like light and darkness. I mean, if you shine light to darkness, there's not gonna be any darkness. You know, so you can't have both. That's the way God is with sin. Sin is like oil or darkness, and God is like water or light. And so they don't mix. So when Jesus was on the cross and took on our sins, I mean, he took on literally every single sin that you have made and everyone else that has made and will make. And so that's a lot of sin. And Jesus took all of that on himself. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is because, again, God and sin don't mix, but Jesus and God were one. So what would have to happen there? Literally, God and Jesus had to kind of be torn apart from each other. You know, so think of like the person I was asking you to think of a little while ago, the one that you love deeply. How would you feel if they passed away, or maybe they have already passed away? That pain you felt, multiply that a couple of times. That's how the relationship between God and Jesus was. And like, I guess you could say evidence of that was when Jesus said, God, or Father, why have you forsaken me? Forsaken means to basically leave behind or ignore, whatever. So if Jesus and God are one, how could God forsake Jesus? Because they basically became separated at a deep spiritual, really personal and deep level. They became torn apart from each other because Jesus accepted the sacrifice of living a perfect life, then taking on our sins. So that's like something really deep, and that is a sacrifice. Jesus willingly accepted that, you know, and on Christmas, that was the day that you could say that he accepted the sacrifice. You know, if he hadn't been born, then the sacrifice wouldn't have been able to start. Because again, Jesus needed to live life perfectly. Without the perfect life, the death would be meaningless. So, by being born, he accepted the sacrifice, and he was able to become the sacrifice in his death. And that was the sacrifice Jesus accepted on Christmas Day. So yeah, that's really all I had planned for today, guys. So I hope you liked it. I hope you're able to learn something new, or maybe see things a little bit differently. But yeah, so again, if you want to make sure you catch all these videos, please subscribe. And yeah, I think that's all I got to say. Make sure you watch my last video, and keep an eye out for my next video. It's going to be on the emotional sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross. So yeah, so remember to preach at all times, and if you have to, these words, guys. Love y'all and God bless.